Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session in our little spin off series called the Disordered series, where my mum and I take you on alternate conversations around body image, disordered eating, and eating disorders. And today we're going to dive into episode 3 and looking at, I think, the big question, which it's going to be, I think, a very in depth conversation today around what if the hardest part of an eating disorder isn't what it does to your body, but what it quietly steals from your life. So today we're going to talk about the moments that never happened, the connection that faded, the version of a person going through an eating disorder that slowly disappears without you even realizing it. So today's episode, we're talking about what the disorder took from us. This episode is going to be about loss, not just physical, but emotional, relational, and I think deeply personal. We're talking about everything the disorder took from us, whether that is identity, trust, joy, freedom, and the simple thing of just time that unfortunately we can't get back. And of course, this episode is being told from lived experience through mum watching it unfold when I was diagnosed at 14 to me living it through my diagnosis of anorexia at 14. I think the big things we're going to talk about today, obviously, if you have experienced an eating disorder or you're watching or walking beside someone going through it, is things like distance, moments that distort reality, things that keep you trapped in silence, and also something that doesn't get talked about enough with this illness, and it's the grief that comes in recovery when you finally begin to see clearly what was lost and what unfortunately cannot be regained. So we're going to dive into the hidden losses, the missed experiences, the strain on relationships, and the silence that kept us stuck. I want to welcome Mum into the podcast again today. So welcome, Mum.
Thanks, Ash.
I think if we get into this topic today, I really want to talk about, firstly, why do we have to lose and why do we lose during this illness? I think a lot of the time we're speaking to people in this space with the work that we do at The Secret Burden, we come across this concept that people can't conceptualize why they have to give up things and why they may have to sacrifice certain privileges they have in their life for a period of time. And based on your experience, Mum, I really want to dive into, firstly, why loss happens during pursuing recovery, and was it necessary in our situation? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, big question. I suppose I don't look at it as loss. I look at it as, I suppose, growing, learning. Because when you're in it, I don't think you really look at it as I'm losing my life or I'm losing part of me. I think part of you grows and part of you adapts to the situation. I kind of never really looked at it from the perspective of loss, if that makes sense. Because I don't think you've really got time, to be fair, to think about that. You know, it's like that whole sink or swim moment. You know, one minute you think you're managing it and the next minute you're not, and it's chaos and carnage, and I don't think you have time to reflect at that point and go, this is loss, if that makes sense. That's only from my point of view. I just looked at it as every day was a battle and we had to try and win it the best way we can. So I didn't think I was losing anything. For me, I thought I was doing my best and trying to get through the day the best way I could. So I didn't look at it as loss.
I can agree, but I also understand that some people, maybe it's not loss then, maybe it's looking at it from a perspective of things had to change. And so the way that life was once lived or functioning, things have to shift in order to recovery to be pursued for someone. And I guess we alter that question around what had to change in order for recovery to be pursued.
Yeah, I think before you get to the crisis point, I think you realize things are changing. Like if we reflect on our story, things were changing quite rapidly with you, with your behaviour and what we were normally doing. Like, us going out to netball carnivals or picnics or friends' places or catching up for barbecues and stuff suddenly changed because of your behaviour around your anxiety and the issues you had with food. So I think that, there is change there and you don't know what it is. So you're trying to navigate your life, our family life, and manage it all without too much chaos. So I think, yeah, change is probably a good word, and it starts to change quickly before the chaos of a major change starts, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's really hard. Like it's a really hard thing to pinpoint because you're just trying to survive, right? You're just trying to get through the day the best way you can. So you don't have the mindset of, oh my God, my life, I've lost my life, if that makes sense. I never thought of it like that. I never thought my life's over or I've lost this because for me, it was making sure that you got through the day and then my family got through the day and I got through the day with as, I suppose, least amount of stress and trauma as possible. So I just didn't have time to think about what I was losing. And I didn't think I was losing anything because my ideal was to save you and I didn't want to lose you. So I suppose that's just the mindset I had.
I did. I thought I lost. And I thought in it, I definitely thought I was losing. And upon reflection, I think I lost. And not from a place of regret, because I believe everything happens for the reasons they're meant to. And, through recovery, I'm able to do what I do now. And I'm very grateful for that. But I absolutely felt like I lost. I was diagnosed at 14 and went through recovery to about 18 in like the full depth of it. For me, I didn't experience what it was like to be a teenager. And I know we can't really define normal, but I feel like I missed out on a lot of normal things because my eating disorder took over of what normal was in like the generational description of what that looks like. And simple things like I never finished school. And although that's not an option for everyone, but I never did year 10, 11, or 12, and I wouldn't even say I was present during those years. So I feel like I lost potentially a schooling experience and not just being at school, but I remember multiple conversations with like that you had with teachers and faculty about keeping me in simple things like the yearbook or keeping me enrolled in school excursions. Like I missed out on all of that on like school camps and getting to know even my peers and my people because I was so withdrawn from it because everything was about healing and recovering from my eating disorder and my health was my priority that I couldn't just interact with friends or I couldn't spend time in engaging with friend groups that I would potentially be involved with because I was there not consistently and I was also constantly at health appointments and I also couldn't face it. So I feel like my eating disorder took a massive social part of my life away from a recovery perspective, but also from my own perspective. I didn't want to socialize as well. That's one of the symptoms, I guess, of the eating disorder is being withdrawn and all the normalized experiences of even going out and eating or celebrating and going to gatherings and parties. I just feel like I missed all of that. And it's weird, I never really realized that I was missing out on something. I think I convinced myself that like it was okay. And And I only realized the loss when, say, around 18, when I was coming out of recovery as such and meeting new people, and I just had no stories to tell. And it made me feel really small because I started to go out with different friend groups that I'd met in workplaces, and they'd all known each other from high school, and they'd shared all these unique experiences together, and they had comments about their school, or they had stories from school about drinking or about doing things with friends or things on weekends, and I just had nothing to say. And it was awkward. Like, then they'd ask if I was meeting new people, they'd ask questions about schooling or about social aspects and things that I'd done. And what I then say, oh, I've actually been sick for 7 years. And then I go into a whole conversation about my eating disorder. And there was two responses. People would either shut off and walk away, and you knew they were not really going to talk to you again because you were labeled as weird. Or the other aspect was that is then they saw it as an open door to then share all of their mental health issues with you because you'd been through something. And I often latched onto those people that gave me value in terms of allowing me to listen. So then I became the listener in nearly every friend group because it was a way for me to still feel a value and almost just step into that role because I had nothing to say. I couldn't relate to anyone. So I feel like it took a lot from me. And as the years have gone on, I've felt that more and more because when I'm meeting new people, I still don't have much else to add to my story apart from the journey that I've been through with my eating disorder and the work that I do, which is still involved with an eating disorder. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And from your perspective, I understand that. But from my perspective, you know, I could have dwelled on, oh my God, I never got to see you at your formal. I never got to see you graduate. I never got to see you do whatever it is. And I can dwell on that and that, but that doesn't do me any good. And as much as I sympathise that you didn't get to do that at the time, you don't have time to think about that as the person trying to help you recover, because you can go down the rabbit hole of, oh, my life is so bad because we didn't get to do XYZ. I just chose not to think about that because I knew if I got you through this stage and I got you through to the other end, that you would find out on your own what your friend group was and you would experience new things that you wanted to do. In hindsight, if you were healthy with the environment that the school was, would you have come out with something else? Maybe. You know, yes, it took it away from you, and that is sad for a teenager to not go through that and have those experiences. But it could have also turned out another way, and you don't know that. So your life has turned out this way, and I commend you for doing the recovery and the hard work, because you are now this amazing young lady that has all the confidence in the world. And yes, you mightn't have a lot of friend groups or a lot of stories to tell, but you're alive to create stories compared to always on this treadmill of in and out of hospital with an eating disorder, and your whole life would be this story. So my goal was to make sure that you totally came through the other end so you could create your own story when you were ready.
Mm.
All right,
Did
because
you ever though, because I think about obviously we went on a family trip to Hawaii and reflecting back on that trip, the eating disorder was very much still present in my life. And that trip was a family trip, one that I'm sure you wanted to walk into and enjoy and love and feel like you weren't bringing the eating disorder away with us. And I remember a conversation around that, like, let's leave the eating disorder at home. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Did you feel loss at that trip? knowing that you had this idea around it being a family holiday, and most of it ended up micromanaging me and my whereabouts and the eating disorder traits on that trip.
No. But once again, I think you can have the mindset of this can take you down a rabbit hole and you can hate yourself and hate your family and hate the situation. It's not me. I went into that holiday organised, positive that if I can show you a different part of the world, that maybe you might see a glimpse of what life could be. So I just went in with all the strength and courage that I could to make sure that that was the outcome. Did it go to plan? No. But, you know, I think there's lots to be said about you can let this disease or the situation that you're in, you can let it define you and you cannot do anything. And I wasn't going to do that. I was the one that was going to be in control of this. And if it, I said to you, we're going to take, we had a whole suitcase full, Ashlee, of your breakfast, wheat bix, Vitabrits, the only things you would eat, all right? Going through customs, they thought we were absolutely mad. And,
We pick smugglers.
everyone thought we were mad going with the situation. But I just had to, you just have to keep moving forward and pushing. And I always had the plan B. Plan B was, okay, if you got over there and you decided that you weren't going to eat anything or, the traits that the eating disorder has, the plan B was to put you in hospital over there, and we made sure we were going to be covered for that, and we get on a plane and we come home. But, we had to manage it the best way we could. And, there was a time there where you went walking in a strange country, didn't know where you were for hours. And we're pacing up and down the beach trying to find you. And, at some stage I thought, oh my God, like, you're gone. Like, where do we start? And, you came back. But as I tried to explain to you, that fear, that fear of not knowing what's going to happen next is so consuming sometimes that you can let it rule your life and ruin your situation. I just had to have the faith that you knew that we were there for you and we were giving you some sort of freedom with boundaries, that you would come back around and realise what you had. And, that's just the faith I held on to. But I couldn't just sit here and do nothing and think that this is our life from now on. I just had to keep challenging. I had to keep pushing, and I had to keep, our whole family suffered from it, yes, but I wasn't going to let them not have a life as well. And I wasn't going to let you not have a life. If you having a life meant that we lived with restrictions and boundaries and managing this forever, then that's what it was going to be. That was the sacrifice I was going to make.
And giving people, I guess, a bit of insight into those restrictions and boundaries. What were they? I mean, we talk about wheat bix, obviously smuggling them into a suitcase with Vitabrits. That's all about managing, as you said, this illness when you're going away and being prepared and structured, because that's what worked. And to the point where I even remember on that holiday going and buying a toaster and having to put it out in the balcony so that I had my exact same meal plan every single day. But what does that look like for people that don't understand when you're put in situations that, say, are normalized, but what are the measures and boundaries put in place to support and manage the recovery of the illness? For example, I remember one time, and you've talked about this openly a lot, around ringing the restaurant up before we actually go to the restaurant and having that plan A and plan B. And plan A was ensuring I had the menu beforehand and I knew what I was going to order, so that when it came to the restaurant and the menu being put in front of me, that we tried to eliminate the anxiety as much as possible. So eliminate any unknowns.
Yeah.
And then, plan B was say that anxiety or the eating disorder turned up at the table. It was okay. It was very strategic of being seated at a table that was right next to the door so that the exit would be very, very clear and very seamless. And it'd be about you taking me out to the exit while the boys stayed and continued the dinner or paid the bill or whatever that looked like.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to give people perspective around what actually managing this illness in
Yeah.
pursuing recovery, doing whatever it takes looks like.
Yeah. It's about planning and it's about being organized. So when, excuse my French, shit hits the fan, and it does, and it will, that you know what the plan is and everybody's on the same page and it's not a massive deal, because that's what this illness likes, chaos. And it likes to create chaos because then that's an excuse for you to go, I'm not going to do that.
Mm.
So that's what I made sure, like, even going over, I don't know if you remember, like flying over on the plane, having all the meals, set up for you and making sure your medication was given to you at the right time so you slept through most of the flight because it was an overnight flight, and then managing the anxiety of that and getting to the other end and having meals ready and navigating our tours around meal times, and then, and going to a restaurant and knowing, if I knew you couldn't make the decision for dinner, then I would say, right, you've got two choices, this one or that one, eliminating all the anxiety, all the choice, making it as seamless as possible. And and having those exit strategies when it does happen. We used to go in prior and say to the restaurant manager, this is our situation, it's not a big deal, but, if you see us leave, we will, you've got our credit card, we will come back and pay the bill, but this is the situation, why, and can you sit us there? And I think being open and honest with people, they appreciate it, because then it's not a big deal and it's not making you the spectacle either. And I think that's really important. But on the other hand, it's really important to teach you how to manage it as well. It's not just me making those decisions for you. It was also giving you a little bit of space to navigate that and make those decisions. And if it was a wrong decision, then we knew what the plan was to get out of it. It was the right decision. We sat there and we supported you. I remember you going down to, what was it, the ABC stores every morning and getting the pineapple because you suddenly realised that you liked the fruit, the pineapple in the thing. And we thought that was great. So we allowed you to do that. And then you would come back another day and go, oh my God, I've tried this. And so for us, they were those little wins. The downfalls were were the long walks and the long, and you not wanting to participate in some things, like be social.
Yeah.
They were the hard things. But everyone that we were with, they knew the situation, just to let everyone, part of this trip was a work trip for me. So everyone knew the situation, and I think it was important, to keep people up to date, and everyone was so supportive. They'd never made a big deal out of the situation, and I think that's the important thing too, is you have to be open and honest with your family and friends and let them know how you're navigating this or managing this, so they can either support you or just walk beside you when it's needed. But I think, talking about things that we've lost or haven't done or whatever, I can sit and dwell on that, but I choose not to, because I think you'd end up being really, really sad on some things you've missed out on. But I have cherished the things that we have been able to do, and that's what I want to focus on.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I get it for you. I get you're a young, you're a young female that got to miss out on doing some really important things in her life. And I understand and empathise with that. I really do, because, I was there once, and, I often talk about my childhood, and, I I try not to make sure that I dwell on it too much because, it may trigger you that you never got to do those things. But I am just so grateful that you are now through it and you can learn how to manage it yourself, and you still ask for help if you need it, which is wonderful. But you are managing your situation now to the best of your ability, and I couldn't be prouder because you're just killing it, Ash. And whether it's from all that experiences of teaching, going through it, and maybe going through the losses that you didn't get, I don't know, but I just think that you could dwell on what you didn't get to do, but I think you just got to keep a positive mindset with this illness and celebrate the small wins and keep challenging yourself through it.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's always going to be perspectives from a carer's point of view to the person living it. And I think it was a real challenge. And even, you talking about, that trip and those small freedoms that you allowed me to have and how big it was for you. But for me, knowing that everybody knew was really hard because I was so ashamed to have it and I never wanted to be that center of attention, or I never wanted people to think, oh, poor me, or we've got to speak cautiously around her, or is she allowed to be doing that, or is she allowed to not to be doing that? And that's why from the start I really didn't want anyone to know, even when I had to return to school and that transition back into school where you had to come in and you were there for my morning tea, lunchtime, and afternoon tea. And every time I had to leave class in the middle of class or at lunchtime, I'd go and eat with my mom. I wasn't in the schoolyards eating with friends. And I was just really abnormal to the normal. And so things like the trip or being at school where I was always, my illness created this big point of difference, made me stand out where I spent most of my life hiding, was really challenging. And especially when it was associated with something like an eating disorder because of the stereotypes attached to it. So I think I'm not yet there yet, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not there in not dwelling on it. And it's not that I dwell on it or every day it's something I think of, but I'm just not there in saying I've I haven't lost, because it's really hard with the encounters that I continue to have today where I'm reminded that I have lost parts of what a typical growing up would look like. And not that I'm sad or that I sit into like a victim mindset. I just reflect on it and go like, wow, that took up a big chunk of my life and I missed out on opportunities that even sitting at like family dinner time, if I like come and have dinner with you guys, or I'm like speaking to my brothers and they're laughing and their mates and they're talking about all their high school memories or things that they did, and I've just got nothing to add, and feeling small and feeling like you have nothing to add to a conversation is quite belittling. Like, not that anyone projects that on you, but you just feel really inadequate. And so I think a big part of that is probably why I wasn't jumping at being back into socialization as quick as I was. Like, why I was just happy sort of being on my own and didn't opt to say, do things like I remember like going through in the family when you guys were trying to like push me back out there and to like meet new people and to do things like my brothers would. Like Ryan, my younger brother, is very social and he meets heaps of people and he jumps into so many new things all the time. And I feel I was compared to him a lot. And comparison, I feel like, is the thief of all of this, because if I wasn't comparing to, say, a typical growing up or teenage years, then I wouldn't have anything to feel bad about, or not even bad about, but to feel like I was missing out on, because I'd have no comparison. But unfortunately, we do have comparison. And I feel like when I was compared to him a lot and people wanted to just chuck me out there and just meet new people. I wanted to do that on my own terms because I wanted to be able to control the situation. I didn't want to jump back in and just be, I'm Ryan's older sister, and as much I love my family and I love Ryan, but often it would come from a conversation of she's been sick for many years, and straight away I was put back into that environment of I'm once again the listener, I'm once again telling my story, and I felt like I couldn't just be normal and I couldn't get out of this sick girl that was just attached to me and even high school friends. And I was, because I was so abnormal and I was the one person out of everyone in our grade that had to always be out of class and always have lunches with her mom and like disappeared for like 2 years of high school. I couldn't escape that. And so for me, I'm still, yeah, I'm just not there. I'm not there with feeling like it's not a loss for me. I've definitely gained a lot and I'm so grateful for where I am today. But when I reflect on that period, I do feel like my eating disorder took a lot from that period of my life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you ask your brothers, they'd probably say the same thing. They lost their sister. And, have those relationships regained? I don't know.
Mm,
That's up to you guys. I can't force that, but it's definitely strained things. And, it's definitely strained things with myself and you and myself and my husband. You can't sit here and say it didn't affect us. It did. There's definitely losses there as far as relationships go because, trust and things have been broken and lies have been told and behaviours have changed and all of those things. So, yes, there's definitely loss within the family dynamic with relationships. As far as comparison goes for you, that's something that, I really can't comment on because that's your journey of what you're comparing it to. For me, as your mum and carer, my job was to keep you alive so you could have some sort of life towards the end of it. And, I tried my hardest to make sure that you had some sort of experiences. And, trying to get you to go out with your brother and his mates was just a form of trying to let you see what life kind of was. But I suppose, when it comes back to you just want to be normal, I don't know what normal is, Ash. Everyone's different. And I think you can compare the loss to the status quo if you want on what the average teenager should do. But as far as normal goes, I don't know what normal is with anybody because everybody is going through something and everybody has some sort of trauma in their family, and they all experience loss at different times. Yours just happened to be a consistent illness at the most precious time of your life. But the reason that it came in at that precious time of your life was because of A, probably your anxiety, and B, you know, your social skills. Probably at that time you didn't realize, how to probably take people because let's face it, there's lots of bullies in the world and there's lots of people that like to, say things and I don't know, have influence on you. And when you're young, you don't know how to navigate that. And us as parents, that's part of our role. But, we just didn't, it was really hard because you weren't, I suppose, talking about what was happening a lot when you were younger. You had this facade that everything was okay until one day it wasn't. So, yeah, it's tough, Ash. It is so tough. And life is tough. Let's
mm,
face it, life is tough. And at some stage, we all have losses. And, you know, it's how you navigate those losses, I think, that makes you into the person on today, on what brings you joy and what you want to get out of life.
mm.
And
Um, you talked about strained relationships. Do you think our relationship is still strained?
Yeah, definitely. And
How?
I'd be lying if I said, it didn't affect our relationship because let's face it, you still see me as your carer that wants, I suppose, the best for you, and that's correct. And it's hard to navigate from that carer to being a mum, and I suppose that's where the relationship is strained. Is I think sometimes you still see, and plus, we're in a charity together where, you probably, even though we're equal, you probably still see me as, your superior, and it's hard to navigate that.
I'm interested because your answer was how you think I feel. But how do you feel? Because the whole time you said, let's face it, you think this, you believe this. But what's your belief based on our straining of relationship?
Well, I think the only thing I can compare it to is my relationship with my mother and my grandmother. And those relationships are still solid today, other that, my grandmother's not here anymore, but my mum is, and my mum is my best friend, and I speak to her every day. And that's probably a comparison that I like to have with you. And what worries me is that you don't know how to relax sometimes and just be a daughter as well. I think you always think you have to be this person that's achieving for me or striving to be your best, or I just want you to be vulnerable with me, and I just want you to have a normal conversation, not around the charity or not about what's, I suppose, going on with other things you're doing in your life. I just want you to talk to me open-heartedly, and that's where I feel it's strained because I don't get that. But I also understand why I don't have that.
And what's your understanding why you don't?
Because we have this history of me being your really strict carer, and I think at times you always think that you're letting me down or you're not doing your best, and for some reason I think you may think that I'm disappointed in you, or I don't know, and that's only me. I'm not That's how I think sometimes. I just want you to be my daughter, and I just want you to be who you are now. And the times that this does happen, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, there are times where you ring me and we just have these lovely conversations and have a laugh, and it's wonderful, and that's what I want. And it's growing, and I'm not saying it's not there. It is there, but I think it's just taking time for us.
Mm. Yeah, I think obviously people have different perspectives around what they believe, but I think,
But we will always butt heads with this because you think sorry, this is me thinking. I think you think differently to how I think, and that's totally fine.
yeah, I think it comes back to like we're different people. And I think from my perspective with say your belief around a strained relationship between you and I, we are very different people. And say what you need in a relationship or what you need in a daughter. And I can't come from a place, I don't have a kid, I don't have a daughter, so maybe it will change. But from my perspective, sometimes I believe that, say, the expectation to ring you every day and have news for you every day and tell you about my whole life every day, for me, sometimes I want to just ring you and it be special and just have a good conversation. Like, I don't have news to share every day. And most days I talk to you through the business and the charity. So then ring, say we talk in the morning about the charity or during work, and then come the afternoon, you ring then to ask about my day. I'm kind of like, yeah, I might respond with what's going on. I like what's up? Because for me, it's hard for me to separate. It really is. When I've spoken to you throughout most of the day and then you just want to chat in the afternoon, I'm like, Mom, I've spoken to you basically the whole day. And not from a place of like, I don't love you or don't want to spend time from you. It's just challenging to really separate that for me. And I guess I am just created differently in the sense that I don't say feel the need to ring someone every single day and to check in every single day. I'm rather I want to have quality conversations and be able to have conversations. But if I'm talking to, say, someone that I love every day and I've kind of got nothing to say, I'm like, oh, I've got nothing to add. And for me, I think that is a bit uncomfortable because, like I've explained previously in today's episode, when I've got nothing to say, I then fall back into the listener mode and I feel quite inadequate. And so I want to be able to come to you with my full energy and to share news. But if I feel like I've spoken to you every day, I guess I don't have the motivation to do that. And that's just how I navigate relationships, how like what you need in a relationship is, as you've mentioned, speaking to someone every day and sharing your life. And I'm a lot more closed off than that. If anything, I'm very much like dad then, where we don't talk about everything every day, or we're not as emotionally open or available as others would like us. And that's potentially where the strain comes, is where there's point of difference in the way that our communication styles are. And I think that's okay. It's just constantly navigating that. And the extra layer of working together, I think, makes this heightened, and can make it, as we are well aware of our situation, sometimes harder to deal with because it's like, where's that line between am I getting, say, my mum, or am I getting my co-worker, or am I getting my carer, which is another thing that sometimes pops up where I've spoken about this a couple of times, where sometimes it feels like I'm always going to be the sick girl because as soon as something's not right, it's, are you eating? Are you making sure you're eating? Is everything okay? And I've come to the point where I've accepted that, and I know, I understand it comes from a place of care, and I don't get as emotionally reactive to it anymore. It used to frustrate me so much to think that everybody, and not just saying like your and I's relationship, but family's relationship, everyone just kept putting me back into that box. It was like as soon as life happened and I'd open up, which was big for me, and explain a situation going on in my life, it was like, well, how are you coping with it? Are you eating? And I was like, fuck, I'm never going to be able to escape this. And I think that was another big part of not opening up to say you guys, because you guys were still triggered, and I completely understand why. And so I think when we talk about strains in relationships, relationships just change and morph into a way of navigating how you once again continue to manage the illness and the person that's gone through it. I think communication is clear, but you're not going to get it right, or it's not going to be perfect, because as we've mentioned, people are different and we have different communication needs.
Correct. And I think, it's about managing expectations, and that's something that, as a parent, you have to navigate, because one day you may experience this, but, all of a sudden you've got a house full of siblings that rely on you, and one day you don't. They're gone and they don't look back. Regardless if you're sick or not, I'm just saying, you as a parent, you raise your children to be with you, and then they depend on you, and then all of a sudden you're teaching them to be young adults with their own set of management that they need to do that, and then all of a sudden they're gone, and you're not caring for anyone anymore. So you put that on top of someone that's sick like yourself, who needed 24-hour care, and then all of a sudden you're better, which is great, and you're gone, even better, because we want you to grow, but still those triggers for us are here when we don't hear from you for days, or we don't, you know, I suppose, see you either, because you're not living here, you're interstate. And so those are heightened when we don't and it's really hard to let go, Ash, and that's the hard thing. And I wish I could let go. But if I let go as a parent, then I don't know, is that me just going, oh, well, see you later? Being a parent doesn't matter anymore? I don't know. That's not how I was raised from my upbringing. I was raised from a really close family, and my expectations is probably that. I want to have a close family, and I want my kids to be able to want to come back and see me. And I don't want to let go of that expectation, because to me that's love. That's what family is. And, I apologise if those expectations make you feel small. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give you as much freedom and independence as I can, but I also want you to know that family is important. And maybe navigating those lines is becoming blurred. I don't know. But, the other thing is, from our perspective, you've got to remember that we sat here and watched you nearly die every day. Every day we woke up and we didn't know if you were going to be breathing. Every day was a struggle, telling family and brothers and that, what your, I suppose, outcome was. And it was really horrible and depressing and draining every day. So it's really hard, Ash, to just go, oh, that part of my life's over and everything's back to normal. Because we didn't get to go to therapy. We didn't get to do, we did the family therapy as a whole family, but me individually or dad individually or your brothers, we just had to get on with our normal life. And if you want to talk about loss and not going through, I suppose, certain things in life where you think your whole life's going to be rosy and everyone's going to be happy, and that's just an unrealistic expectation. But I think, kind of on reflection, lost is probably, I don't have, for me, I probably don't have the family dynamic that I thought I would. And that's okay. I've learned to accept that. And I think the thing out of it, though, I think we've just been really blessed that I've kept the lines of communication open, and we're open and honest with one another, and we can have these really in-depth, open conversations, and we can say things that hurt one another. But I think we've learned that emotions sometimes get in the way, and you say things you don't mean. But I think we've all had the maturity to know that it comes from a place of love, and we can talk it out. And that's one thing I'm really proud of.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think that we all grow up and I think develop an understanding of a family or a family dynamic based on what we had or what we didn't have. And as you said, that then forms into some sort of expectation around what we hope for in this life. And sometimes we hope that other people jump on board with that, and we forget that other people grow up differently. Like, as you've mentioned in your childhood and what you had or what you didn't have, I grew up in a household that had so much love and was all put together. And in a way, I don't see that as something that I need to feel. It's almost like something that I want to then go out and see what independence looks like. But that's completely different to how you were brought up and then your expectations. And as you said, then it's kind of navigating, well, where do we all meet in the middle while we're all trying to grow and navigate and see how we want to steer our life in what direction that is. You mentioned there that like sometimes, you haven't moved on, or you still find sometimes that you're triggered or that something comes up. Do you feel that you've you've let go of that period of time and what it had over our family in terms of me with the eating disorder.
Yeah, I have. I don't I don't fear that you're going to fall back into your eating disorder. I actually don't fear that at all. I think the experience was so traumatic that I don't, I hope that you never want to go there again, because I certainly don't. But I think there are times when I fear for you in a different way. But that's just me being a parent. You don't ever, as a parent, and you don't ever get over the fear of something happening to your child, or the worry that, I haven't heard from you for a week and I'm like, what, oh, like, what's going on? Or I haven't seen you on socials, or, things like that. That's when I start to worry, because I go, you normally used to be like that. And that's just normal worry and stress of a parent. It's got nothing to do with the eating disorder. I think, I think you can manage your eating disorder very well. And I think you know what the signs and symptoms are if it raises its ugly head again. And I think I have the confidence in you that you would reach out for help. So, no, I don't. It's not that, it's other things.
Mm.
And it's probably now me stressing about you as I would have in your normal teenage years, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, we often joke about me doing it backwards.
Mm,
Kind
yeah,
of now going through the eating disorder and coming out into a world where I'm now managing it
yeah,
and having to not play catch up, but discover everything for the first time, which is it's a beautiful thing. And when you're around good people, they'll walk beside you with that. They won't judge you on that. And I've learned that, I think, at the start when you are quite young. How do you expect other kids or teenagers to understand what you're going through and say, oh, yeah, I'll walk beside you with that rather than judge you on it? Unfortunately, that's just the way of the world and the way of growing up. So it has been quite beautiful to be able to communicate that with people I'm meeting for the first time now, and also just doing it independently myself.
yeah. And that's
But
and that's totally normal. And I love that you're doing that. It's just, as a mum, sometimes you want to share that with you,
yeah,
and because that's my expectation, and that's my my thing I've got to navigate, not yours. So
mm, yeah, it's relationships constantly something that you've got to work at. But I think one thing that I have learned as you being my mom growing up is that communication is key. And if you've got that, even if it comes out ugly or messy, you can sort things out no matter what, as long as you communicate. And I know I am definitely not perfect at it in terms of delivering it and the way I go about it, but it is something that I am still learning to navigate and to do. And I don't think we ever perfect it, especially when emotions get involved. So before we sign off for today, it's been a massive discussion around what the eating disorder took from us and then how we morphed into different perspectives in terms of identity, loss, and relationships being a big one through any eating disorder. There is our final question that we had submitted by someone. There was a bunch of questions that were submitted, but for the Q&A today, the question is, now the first episode was about changing up the perspectives, and we're going to sort of dish that. And we're just going to do it from our own perspectives because in the end, we end up both answering it from our own perspectives anyway. So the question today that was randomly selected, it was during the midst of Ashlee's eating disorder at home, what was the hardest part to deal with? So I'm going to hand it to you, Mum. So during my diagnosis of anorexia and the recovery at home, so purely at home, what was the hardest part to deal with, do you think?
sorry, did you say in recovery or before?
Oh, Well, it doesn't specify. It
Okay.
just says during the midst of Ashlee's eating disorder at home, what was the hardest part to deal with? So let's do, say, let's focus on those 22 weeks before I was admitted into hospital and before I even wanted to pursue recovery. What was the hardest part during that period?
Oh, definitely the trying to get you to eat was the hardest time in that period. And I think, you had just come to the realization that everything had calories, and just trying to even get through to you that having a glass of water was okay. So I think, that was the toughest times, navigating those first 22 weeks of early diagnosis and trying to do family based therapy and trying to get some sort of normalization of eating routine at home was the hardest because you just refused to eat. So,
Mm,
that was the most difficult and traumatizing time. And then you exercising late at night in your room, and then we had to move you into our room. And then, there's some days you'd stand up and you'd faint. We'd have ambulances here and God knows what. So all of that just distressing time purely because you just refused anything, any treatment, any
mm,
conversation.
mm. Yeah, I would definitely say the hardest part during those 22 weeks was almost the unknown chaos of every day. Like there was no structure, there was no routine, nobody sort of knew what was happening.
Um,
Obviously, for me, like the thing was like the food, like that was the scariest part.
mm.
But just having no idea what we were doing, like it
Yeah,
kind
and
of,
we were trying all different medications, and nothing was seemed to work. There was no structure. So yeah, all of that was just chaos, and that was just the hardest part. You were just chasing your tail the whole time. I think.
yeah,
I
didn't know
think.
what day brought. It was more like
Yeah.
ambulance, and then there was police officers, then there was like the boys were home and they weren't home, and then all these different foods, and I could sense the confusion and fear between like you and dad, and I
Mm.
think that it was just so messy. It was so messy, and
Yeah.
if you can avoid having no structure or no plan, I think especially when dealing with trying to get someone through to recovery, I think it just you want to prevent that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to go in. And that's why I suppose we talk about it early, because if you can get it early and have some sort of structure before the illness really sets in, you've got a better chance of not going through all that chaos. To answer the question, coming home, I think the hardest part coming home for me was probably, I don't know, it's I actually loved being home with you and having the structure and the routine, and you were on board, and we seemed to be, I don't know, on the same page. But then after a few months of that, it kind of started to slip backwards. So that was me again, I think, challenging you and being really strict and being following through on those threats and boundaries and stuff. So I think, that was really hard for me again because I didn't want to be that person to you. And that's probably the hardest thing I struggled with. But I just knew I had to put down my loving mummy best friend side to be that person to get you through. And so I think that's kind of was the hardest part, because I think some of that has just sticked with me, and I've probably become a harder person from it in
Yeah.
in good ways and in worse ways.
Hmm. I think for me, coming home, the hardest part was realizing I needed to change because, you went from being really messy and chaotic and fighting for survival, and then going through hospital for the period that I was really strict, having a structure, becoming quite comfortable with every meal was the same. I knew the outcome, I knew how my day looked. to then coming home and realizing you now need to transition back into your home environment and back into normality. And that means changing, like you no longer need your intense recovery anymore. Like now you need to start challenging food and you need to start getting back out there socially and you need to start letting go of this eating disorder. And for me, that was the hardest part. And I think that's why I rejected that for so long. I was like, nah, I just want the same structure. I want the same food. I want the same routine. And a little part of me like wanted to get out there and do it, but I was so scared and so fearful because I knew what all those triggers were and I knew what life had waiting. I knew how scary it was. And so I just wanted everything to stay the same because it became comfortable and it became controlled. And so the hardest part for me was realizing once initiated that for me around you have the choice, you can do this for the rest of your life, but it is going to be this boring and it is going to
Mm.
be dipping in and out of your eating disorder and her still being very much in control. Or you can just take a little step out and just change something and just keep changing little things and just see what happens. And that was, I think, my hardest thing for me was realizing, like getting to the point where I was like, I need to change if I want to be freed from her, and then actually taking that step.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I did because I mean, we are where we are
Yeah.
today, but that was definitely the hardest transition for me.
Yeah. I would like to add to mine is that I had mixed emotions. I really loved taking you up to therapy to our therapist up at Tanamara, and I enjoyed that journey going there. I remember we'd go to the shopping centre and I'd get a coffee and, you'd eat your morning tea and we'd have a bit of a chat and then we'd go to therapy and then you'd just unleash on me about how I did everything wrong. I did this, I did that. And then on the way home, I would want to talk to you about it and you just go to sleep. And I would be so angry and I'd be so hurt and I'd be like, can't believe. I just remember there's some of these conversations. I'm like, I can't believe she thinks that's what I'm like. Blah blah blah. So I think a lot of that at the beginning was realization that was I like that for me? Like, was I actually like that, or is that the anorexia spreading lies to you that that's what I'm like? And you know, and there's some things I owned. There were some things where I said, yeah, I probably did push you into things you didn't want to do. But as a parent, you just want your kids to try everything, and maybe my language around certain things wasn't the best, or the way I behaved wasn't the best, Then I owned some of that like that. And I went, yep, that's totally, I get that. That's on me. But some things I'm like, oh my God. And so that was really difficult because there's some days I didn't want to go to therapy with you. I'm like, you know, but that was just part of it. You just had to suck it up. And, that was, yeah, in the end, that therapy was probably the hardest thing, but the most saving thing for us,
Mm.
I think.
Yeah,
As
there's a
much
lot.
as it, as much as it was so hard, it was,
Mm.
we
Can I just
grew,
say,
we grew from it.
I did not purposely fall asleep on the way home. It was just therapy went for like 2 hours and it was draining. I was so emotional in every therapy session that when we got in the car, and because I'm not driving at the time, it's just like we're driving home. Like it took us an hour or something, an hour and a half to get home, and the rocking of the car, and it was just it's cradling me to sleep. So I wasn't avoiding conversation. It was just so much easier to fall asleep.
Yeah, Zania. But I think too, it didn't help because you being who you are, and maybe part of half me, half your dad. Your comments sometimes were just so flippant and
Oh yeah.
blunt. I'd be like, "What?" And so then I'm fuming. It was just, yeah.
Mm.
Anyhow, yeah. So
Therapy's hard. Everyone do it.
it is hard, but therapy is meant to be hard. If it
Mm.
wasn't hard, like you don't grow.
Yeah.
You don't learn about yourself. And that's, and that's one thing I would like to add. Like, there's no rule book here when you bring a child home from hospital that says, hey, you got to do this and this, and when this happens, do that. There's nothing. You're going it off, you're parenting from your own experience or from influences from other people, and you're going from your gut, and you're just doing your best you can. So, it's tough, and you've got someone else's life in your hands. So it's really, really hard some days. But yeah, I'm not dishing therapy. I think therapy is great. And because I think you need to, when you're struggling with things, you need to learn how to manage them.
Need almost that mediator as well when you're dealing with emotions, especially with people that you love. So thank you to that person for delivering that question. It's been great to reflect back when people sent through questions, so I really appreciate it. Keep them coming. It's been a massive episode around what the disorder took from us, and I'm very grateful that we're able to have this conversation and hopefully still be friends by the end of it. I am very grateful for you, Mum, as I have been throughout this whole journey, and I thank you as well for having this opportunity to talk to you through our experience of what we've learned and what we're continuing to navigate. And hopefully there are people out there that are also gaining just little things from it, whether it's one takeaway or two, just something that can help you in your journey or someone that you're supporting in their journey. So thank you once again, Mum, for jumping on.
That's all right. Thank you for the conversation. And and if there's, I suppose, one thing I want to end with is just watch your expectations.
Be mindful. Be mindful. They're not always the same for everyone. So
correct.
Thank you. And thank you as well to everyone else out there for listening. You can catch us on our social pages at The Secret Burden, as well as our website. If you need any support or if anything came up for you that you found triggering, please reach out to us. We're happy to help or support where we can. Otherwise, thank you for listening to this episode. I'll catch you guys all in the next episode. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.